April 1956. First time I ever threw a switch in a radio station, and that's a scary thought at that point in my life, a very young kid, and my heart came right up in my throat, and, you know. No, I worked 6 years in radio, 2.5 years of that at WSB Radio as the night news editor. I really think I always felt like I was a one-legged man in a two-legged industry. Broadcasting was both radio and TV, and I was just doing radio. And when an opening came up at 5, I came over and auditioned, and nothing changed.
Panorama News, compiled and produced by the Channel 5 News Department. Here is your anchorman, Jim Axel.
Good evening. The Georgia Senate...
Back then, you told a story that had to be told, and then you tried to see where there were some pictures you could add to it to give it some flavor. There wasn't much film available. There was no tape available in '62, so we added rear screen projection pictures and things like that, not much.
In the nation's capital, President Johnson...
We didn't have a lot to work with. When I came here, the news department was 8 people. In 1962, you had maybe 4 cameramen, and maybe 2 of them had sound cameras, and 2 of them had just silent little wind-ups, bell and howls. And they'd have to get their film back in no later than maybe 3 o'clock.
The Vietnam War is slowly beginning to affect all Americans.
Vietnam was just beginning in '62, in the early '60s. If you wanted any video from Vietnam, you got it 3-4 days later. You were using the state-of-the-art technology that was available at that time. It's just there wasn't a lot of technology available.
President Nixon is heading up a cast of notable Republicans who are sweeping this country.
From an inside view, the big change began in '73. That was when a fellow named Pat Palillo came to town. His idea with Channel 5 News at that point when he became news director was, there are 3 stations in town. We're going to be different. People are going to notice us. So he put us in tan jackets with 5s in the pocket, made us get our hair cut like the Beatles, and literally made fools out of us at times. But it got the attention that he wanted. And some of the promos we did at that time would just blow your mind.
We're the Eyewitness News Team.
Be there in 5 minutes.
And nobody travels faster or farther to get the news breaking in your city.
When live TV was coming in, the decision was they wanted me out there live on that first story every night at 6 o'clock.
We're on our way.
The Eyewitness News Way.
And that was the start of the aggressiveness of local news, I think. It was a time when people in the industry had discovered that local news could be a revenue generator.
Jim Axel, you can depend on him.
When you sit down and start to think about the changes that have occurred in 34.5 years in this business, it's just really very dramatic.
In Egypt, newly installed President Anwar Sadat has made...
If there's one thing people have come up and told me in recent years, it's the thing they like about me is you're believable. So I believe you when you tell me something. Well, that's telling me that I've been successful at my job.
Well, another Hollywood kidnapping made today's headlines. The story after another report from Bob Underwood, sales manager for Nally Chevrolet.
Well, when you're selling brand new Chevrolets...
First, this message from Nally Chevrolet. Yeah, I mean, that's... At that time when sponsors bought a newscast, they bought the introduction to it as well, and that was just the way things were done back then.
Oh, Nally, see Nally, Nally Chevrolet.
In other state capitol developments today...
Back then, I was still a young guy. It sounds like we're trying to sound like a newscaster. Back then, it was like, well, you had to read the news the way the news was because Walter did it. Or you had to play David Brinkley and talk like David did because that's the way news was given at that time.
Russia today accused Switzerland of allowing...
You just look back at those things and wonder, was I ever really that young? You have to do certain things for promotional purposes.
Keep laughing and smiling till the little red lights go off.
Yes.
That's what that looks like.
And you can end up with some pretty ludicrous stuff sometimes. And, you know, it may be everybody dressing up with turtlenecks and beetle haircuts, which we did. I was the one that didn't want to be there. It may be putting on a wild Hawaiian shirt with sunglasses, which I did. I think it's possible that this was while Jimmy Carter was campaigning in the state of Florida in 1976.
Jim, you must be next.
I am.
Right.
Yes.
It isn't so much that you do them because that's the way you dress or that's the hairstyle you want or one thing and the other, depending on the news director at the time, depending on the mood in the market at the time. You're told this is what we want.
Your comments are always welcome, but we don't know what your opinion is unless you write.
Thank goodness you've never found a picture from the one time when I grew a beard, which was in 1977. You're having a new toilet installed in your home, and your plumber doesn't have the model you want. Well, I don't know if we get through this or not. Human nature is when you really start to laugh because something's funny, you lose control. The folks at Consumer Reports suggest you try the plumbing store. Been a couple of times that have been, you really lose it. You know, it's gone. I'm through.
You know, things have really gone down the drain from here, right?
You just laugh. That's all you can do is you say to somebody else, take over, or you just say, we're through, goodbye.
I was going to ask you, how'd you make it through without laughing?
Almost.
This is an unlawful assembly.
The nation certainly knew the civil rights struggle was here in '62.
Go home or go to your church. This march will not continue.
It was probably the major story that was taking place all over at least the southern half of this country, was the fact that people were recognizing that black Americans had more rights than they were getting. Television had a major impact on the civil rights struggle. Television had a major impact on the Vietnam War and the rise of feeling in the nation against the Vietnam War.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The assassination of President John F. Kennedy, what to me was a kind of a turning point, because it was at that point that people realized how television could just be so invasive into their lives. I think any reporter worth his salt likes getting on the street if it's a good story.
Does being a prisoner of war family isolate you from society?
The program they also served, 1970. Very heartrending to have to deal with the families and loved ones of those men who were prisoners of war in Vietnam.
Today, TV5 News Scene begins a week-long series of reports on the aerosol ozone controversy. It was here at Aeromist Corporation that I got my education in aerosol packaging.
It was just a story that grabbed me reading it off the wires. The fact that the hairspray and the aerosol cans we were using 15 years from now were going to be destroying part of our ozone layer.
Inside Atlanta, the job of WAGA Special Unit.
I left Anchorman in '77 and became part of the Special Investigative Unit. Now, I did a number of stories that I was very proud of doing. Got a doctor out of the state. A private detective put in jail.
Only on 5, because you have the right to know.
A producer and I were told to go to Washington, D.C. and cover Jimmy Carter leaving the White House. Little did we know that the Iranians would decide to release the hostages at that exact time.
And that every one of the 52 hostages was alive, was well, and free.
We are now live at the Capitol.
And the producer and I found ourselves on a 747 bound for Frankfurt that night. And we're there in position when outgoing President Carter arrived on Air Force One to head to Wiesbaden to greet the hostages who had been released.
Then, his mission accomplished, former President Jimmy Carter boarded this presidential jet for the return flight to Robbins Air Force Base.
And then, of course, the trek to Wiesbaden and being there for 4 days. And the trek back to Upper New York State, to West Point, for the arrival of all the buses there.
That moment has finally come. The 52 Americans and their families have arrived here at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy. They are home.
The high point of my professional career, always will be.
I am proud to induct into Emmy's Silver Circle, come on up, big guy, my friend, Jim Axel.
Storytelling is what I do. And be accurate, and be clear, and not make mistakes. That's important to me.
Staying on 3 for A5.
And if there is any legacy, I hope that the co-anchors who I leave behind will pick up the violin and play the tune every day the way I've done it.
That's our time for now. Thanks for yours. Have a good day.